Roll call, Mr. Enders.
Mr. Allen.
Present.
Calhoun.
Here.
Ms. Stobler.
Here.
Mrs. Edwards.
Here.
Mrs. Grant.
Here.
Mr. Kinley.
Here.
Mrs. Petrosky.
Here.
Mrs. Stemler.
Here.
Mrs. Thomas.
Here.
All 9 members present.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Letter B, approval first of the minutes. There are 3 sets of minutes for June 13th, the regular meeting, June 15th, Capital Projects Committee, and June 27th, regular meeting. May I have a motion to accept?
I'll make that motion. Oh.
Second.
I'll second.
Do we have any questions or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Not in favor, like sign. Motion carries. Second is Treasurer's Report. There are 2 reports. There's the June 2022 Treasurer's Report and there's the June 2022 Investment Report. May I have a motion?
Motion.
Now second.
Questions or concerns? Go ahead.
Just on the investment report, I want to bring to your attention that we did do another $1 million investment at the end of June. The Fed meets this week, so we will review interest rates again after that meeting. Our current interest rate on our checking account from monthly to all of our monthly accounts is 1.75%. And also just to note that on the investment report, you'll see a $15,000 redemption in there. Those are our first scholarship awards from the Gilhart Scholarship. So if you see that, that's what those are from.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Not in favor, like sign. Motion carries. Next, we have approval for the bills. The bills for this month are $5,033,790. And I'm sure you want to give us some information on that, Mr. Enders.
Yes, I do. So the bills are slightly up this month. There's 2 things going on here. First of the year, we do a lot of front load of our payments, so that's part of it. A bigger piece of it is our quarterly PSERS for employer contribution was due. That's $1.4 million. So that's the primary cause of the increase. Other things like the district's HSA contributions for employees, that's $200,000. That's once a year. Our work comp was just shy of $80,000. There again, that's only once a year at the beginning of the year. Our 2 projects, we had payments on those. One to Site Logic, that was just short of $610,000. And Harris, which was our new fob system, there was a payment for that. That was $21,000. Other things to note, if you're looking at the checks, we have in July started using primarily our Muncie bank account as our primary bank, as the board had voted on. We are working at closing down our Pliget bank accounts. So I'm anticipating next month you'll start seeing less activity on there. You might still see them being reported because once we get everything transitioned, then we're looking at cleaning up outstanding checks.
Let's see, dog.
Wait a minute, Nancy. I didn't get a motion yet. Can I have a motion on approving the bills?
I'll motion.
Okay, now Nancy.
What is the Muncie Dog Pound? What is that account?
That is the account solely linked to the coffee.
Oh, okay,
shop up at the high school.
yeah.
The life skills teacher up there is using that as also part of her curriculum. When we set that account, they have, exact duplicates of the actual checks. They're dummy checks with no numbers on them. They're filling out checks. They're filling out deposit slips. They're getting duplicate bank statements and reconciling them, so they're using it for that purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I have a question on the payment to Eastern Alliance Insurance. Is that the one you're referring to?
That was a work comp for $80,000.
So we charge that to dues and fees, or am I looking at the report wrong?
It should be charged to a balance sheet account, because it's actually run through, it gets charged out to the expenses through payroll every pay. But I can double check that. It should not be going to a dues and fees account.
Oh, well, it's, I think it's, yeah, it's a 10-0474.
That is a liability account.
Okay,
All accounts that start with 0 are a balance sheet account.
thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Not in favor, like sign. Motion carries. Moving over to presentations. Communications, Dr. Omer.
I just want to mention to the board, we did have some conversation last meeting in public comment about asking about PlanCon and our use of PlanCon. And just point out, I did send it to the board, but I wanted to say it publicly, that PlanCon was not funded by the legislature for 22-23. So you do not have the ability to use PlanCon in any projects as was asked at the last public comment. That's all.
Can I also give the
Go ahead.
board an update on the state budget? I apologize for it. So as you are aware, the state budget was passed. There was the board members received this in their board update a couple weeks ago, but I do also think it's important for the public to hear it. Basic ed subsidy increase to the district, all these amounts are primarily, or only to our district, was $606,575. Special ed funding was an increase of $136,133, and CTE funding was an increase of $18,970. That totaled to $761,678. Our final budget that as approved by the board had a budget deficit of $1,357,258. With these increases from the Commonwealth, that budget deficit would be reduced by $595,580. There is no intentions or no discussion here, and I have no intentions of recommending opening up the budget to reflect that. There's really honestly no need for it. As I presented the final budget, I said that any increases would just reduce our budget deficit. So, like I said, I wanted to provide those amounts to you publicly. There is money in there set aside for health and safety and for mental health. There's some conversations internally here about that, whether or not they are being used to pay for existing items in the budget or if they'll be used for new initiatives as part of those conversations. Any questions you want to do?
Back in February, I think the budget had been presented by the governor, and you had projected what we would get. Are the final numbers close to that? Or
Just pulled up that spreadsheet as you were asking me. The budget that the governor projected showed a total increase of basically $1.65 million. Just a little bit above that. So we got about half of that.
do we know why? I mean,
Politics, Wayne.
did some of the numbers change from his original proposal? I mean, they must.
Charter schools, I think, would be one.
Well, that didn't include the savings from charter schools that he had presented.
Right.
But to be blunt, a day after the governor released his budget, the legislator said it's dead on arrival.
Yeah.
So it's a negotiation. I don't recall ever seeing a governor's budget just fly through the legislature.
I'm just asking that because I looked at Williamsport's, what they got. And it seems like just simply based on enrollment, they got much greater,
Well, if you give me a second, I can speak to that. There was in the basic ed subsidy, there was what was called level up funding that was put in there, and not going into the mechanics of that. I just wanted to pull up a spreadsheet I have for all the districts in the Commonwealth. Williamsport is the only district in Lycoming County that received a piece of that level up funding. The math behind that was a lot of need-based equations.
okay,
So, I mean, their level up funding was just over $2 million.
okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anything else on communications?
No, thank you.
President's report, there was an executive session prior to this meeting at 5:45 PM for the purposes of personnel, legal, and safety issues. Next would be the IU report.
I have a request from when Dr. Almer spoke about PlanCon. There are people that are listening and watching this that don't understand what PlanCon is. And because PlanCon is not going to fund any of the building reimbursement, then any kind of building would be totally on the taxpayers.
That is correct.
They need to understand that.
Yeah,
The
there
public
will,
needs to
there
know.
will not be, PlanCon, it would be the state, PlanCon is the state reimbursement process for building projects, which
Yeah.
essentially what I'm saying is there is none. So anything we do is gonna come from our funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
There's been a moratorium for a significant number of years.
And people
But
don't
they add a new
understand
each
that.
year. IU report, anything for us, Jesse?
I just want to say congratulations to Dr. Martell for her superintendent position that she got in Canton. She'll no longer be at IU 17, which is their loss, but Canton's gain. That's it.
Thank you. Superintendent's report.
I'm going to start this evening by recognizing Stephanie Windecker and Martins to discuss their compensation request. I do want to point out that the presentation they're going to use, you have a copy of at your seat.
So they all have a copy?
They do all have a copy, yep.
All right, well then, I'm actually good without that. I thought that was gonna have to be scrolling, so. Good evening, my name is Stephanie Windecker. I'm here to represent Windecker Enterprises, along with Elizabeth Motters with me, she works with us as well, and Cam Kephart from Susquehanna Transit has joined us too. So I'll go through what you guys have in front of you. The compensation request that we're asking for services provided to the district, filling in such as like a transportation supervisor. That also can be called director of transportation and many other titles. I just went with that one. Our service that we've provided and why we're asking for this request. The duties have provided are those expected of a full-time supervisor of transportation employed by a school district, not by a contractor fulfilling the duties as a contractor. This position requires a lot of time, attention to detail, and a large amount of communication. Windecker Enterprises has provided this service for the past 4 years without being compensated. And I might say I've not asked prior to that. And we can touch upon that if anybody, cares to ask. But the purpose of this position, ALVA Supervisor of Transportation, is to direct transportation services, provide information necessary, and serve as a resource to others by planning, evaluating, developing, implementing, and maintaining services while in compliance with established guidelines. course, those guidelines being from the state as well as the school district. Bus Boss, this is the program that Jersey Shore Area School District uses as a transportation program. And we've had it here within the district for several years now. This is kind of the Cliff Notes version of what the Bus Boss program does. We create bus routes for the district, assign students to appropriate routes, schools, locations, and schedules, enter the student information. Then you notify each student's building of that information. You notify the parent, guardians, and such. And it's consistently making changes. I know that some of you, I mean, I don't want to say it's complicated. It's not that it's complicated, but if you make one entry, it's a ripple effect and it changes. And you can't trust the program to think for itself. And I would compare that to your GPS in your vehicle. So if you punch in that address and you look at that, sometimes you're not always going to end up where you know that it would be better if you went with the old Rand McNally and read your atlas instead. The routes, they're not simply established or carried over from year to year. The routes that existed last year, they remain in the program. However, at the beginning of the school year, the IT department rolls over each student. So all that does is update their grade level. But in fact, every fifth grader, every eighth grader that are moving up, then that causes an error. That's what those kids show as. We can get to that. I just wanted to explain that there's a lot of changes. It's not a simple click, and we're ready to start the school year. And we have a couple examples here of, with the students moving up. There were 189 kids last year with the sixth grade, 210 in the ninth grade. And then, of course, there's kindergarten, which all need entered, and there was 157 of them. Now, Elizabeth does enter all that information, and of course, it's, all the general stuff. But the thing is as soon as she identifies a student, the first thing she has to do is, are they eligible for busing? Because obviously you guys don't want to be paying us to haul somebody who should not be getting it, whether they are within walking distance or whether they're technically not in your district, which we have located that sometimes too. We do get
And I think,
those requests.
Stephanie, if I could, I think that's one of the board questions is, well, what happens on the district end? We determine eligibility. So that's something that Dr. Osenbach is doing on the district end with transportation to, here's a new kid, here's 157 new kindergartners, or here's someone who moves in. It has to go through her to verify residency and eligibility before they're assigning that student to a bus route. So there is some mixing and matching to what's happening here on our end versus what's happening on their end. But one of those fail-safes in your process is, are they a kid that we should be transporting? Do they qualify? That's a district decision. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. Because of course you guys are, the district will only get reimbursed for children who are eligible for that. Every student, there's kind of a small example there of what that registration form is, and that's a screenshot of kind of what the Bus Boss program looks like. And there again, with a simple click or drag of a line, it can alter, and unless you catch that, the computer's really going to tell you how it feels you should be doing this. With the stops, they need to be added due to new students or changes in routes. Stops also need to be removed from runs that are no longer being used. Obviously, we're in a very rural school district, and from time to time, things from the beginning of the school is very busy. And I know that Dr. Ulmer had mentioned that, some of you had questioned about the time period of this responsibility. August, September, even July as the requests come in, yes, that's a very, very busy time. But it's not the only time. This job goes on throughout the entire school year. And a simple example of that might be just one family moving, buying a new house, and that changes. And it's not just a simple process, especially if there's a difference between an Avis bus run where you have 20 students assigned. It's not going to alter that bus run. Those stops are set. A rural one out on Lorson Road, you're going to create a new stop that might potentially change the timing if it's a Sugar Valley run. I really shouldn't get ahead of myself, but there's just trying to give you a little example of the way things can affect with one simple request. That's just one family. And like I said, it goes on throughout the year, and students with their information changes. We also, when a new address needs entered and if transportation is eligible and stuff and whether they're assigned, but even if they're transferring within the district, sometimes, that is a big thing. We had 146 address changes, 43 students transferred to a different school. So depending on, it's one thing if you're talking about within our schools, the public schools, but when you take a child out of Jersey Elementary and you send them to Lock Haven Catholic or to Bishop Newman, that changes the picture.
And before you go on, one thing you didn't say on the previous slide, but because she's talking about changes, I want you to notice that in last year alone, there were because we pulled this information for her, there were 323 new registrations that happened after the first day of school. So essentially there were an average of 2 kids a day that they were moving somewhere, either adding to a stop, moving from a different stop. They wouldn't have been moving from a different stop because we only pulled new registrations. So 323 students had to either be added or we disqualified them from transportation after the first day of school.
With our schools, there's different calendars to follow as well. And that does not stay consistent throughout the year either, because just like with us, when we have snow days, the parochial schools, some of the other schools, they alter their calendars as well. And that affects, if we are transporting 4 different schools on one bus, then you can see where when we have an early dismissal or a delayed start or such, how that affects everything. All that must be communicated to the families, obviously, as we're handling those things. The times, that's another issue as well, is trying to make it all sync with starting times so that we're able to get to these places when we need to be. All special bus requests need to be set up. They are turned in every year. They do not carry over from the previous school year. Which I think I've already touched upon most of that as far as it's not just automatically assigned. All private school students need to be entered. These are turned in every year. They do not carry over from year to year, which of course we generally have to reach out and sometimes remind these different buildings to do so. And there's a little breakdown just of 3 of the big ones within the district here of Sugar Valley, St. John, and Walnut Street. Then there's withdrawals, making students inactive. When you see the route and a stop that the student was assigned to, you remove the stop from a run if that was the only student assigned to. So in other words, if a bus has to reroute and it's 2 miles out to get that individual, then when you pull that child off, everybody after that kid is affected. So therefore, then that gets altered. You would notify those parents as well. And that's where a lot of the responsibility, I think people don't realize the amount of communication. Years ago, there was always a designated transportation director and such. And that would be the person who was doing so much of this communication, to where over the last several years, we've taken that in-house in our office. And I don't want to say we picked it up to help and handle this. And so it's a big process between making sure mom and dad are on the same page, the building's on the same page, and obviously it's our responsibility to make sure the driver's on the same page as well. The other thing is, there's a lot of special requests here within our district. They're granted permission. So just about every single bus route, there's multiple calendars from these families. And I can tell you, for example, you've got 30 children on the bus behind you, and our drivers have these calendars, and it says Meemaw's Monday, Tuesday, So there is a lot of communication between the buildings and us, and of course we expect the parents to give us that stuff as well, but it does get a little complicated. That used to be when a change happened, a phone call would come down here and then out to us, where we've kind of shortened things up just to try to make sure that we're handling things as quickly as possible. Some of the additional duties, besides all of the bus boss chaos and handling that, is arranging transportation to specialized facilities necessary for emotional, behavioral, or living situations. That goes on the entire school year. It actually, I feel like, progresses as the school year goes along because of what students encounter in school, what they need to change. We find out from the district that this student needs to be transported to this facility or that facility. Sometimes there's a living situation that pops up, and obviously we don't have 300 yellow taxis, so we can't always just run and accommodate with what time and such. So Elizabeth and myself and Cam, that's the kind of stuff we're used to, is adapt, try to hurry up and accommodate what we need to do so those kids get to those facilities. Creating special runs such as the after-school program and ESY kindergarten camp. Those are all things that some school districts can create themselves, hand it over to a contractor. We do that legwork, and we put that stuff together. I myself, the after-school program, I know it makes me nervous because to me, I compare it to what used to be called late runs. Late runs were for secondary students. Well, there's a big difference in the winter time when it's dark at 5 o'clock at night, and we have 3 buses leaving JSE with these after-school programs, because that building's, once we roll out of there, that building's empty. And so it does make us nervous. And I can honestly say, I give Elizabeth great credit, because when those drivers call in with a name, she typically knows right away who they're talking about. So, and that's just an extra, I feel like we just try to do our service and do it well. We know that's how we'd feel if it was our kids. The camera systems, we're the liaison between the district and Angel Tracks. That's, who we get the district gets, to work with the cameras and such, and just communicating with them to whether it's repairs, new cameras, or such. Rolling right through here. On our contract, there's actually item numbers 12, 13, and 17 that all indicate a lot of this responsibility is for the district. Like, there's several things that are noted on there. Contractors supposed to fulfill from what the district states. And I wanted like a little comparison to some of our neighbors. Williamsport, they have a director of pupil transportation. Obviously, they've got 4,700 students and only 98 square miles. Keystone Central, they have a transportation supervisor as well as a transportation secretary. Approximately 3,700 students, 970 square miles. Loyal Sock, supervisor of transportation, approximately 1,500 students, 21 square miles. And in case anyone is not aware of, here at Jersey Shore, we have approximately 2,200 students and 385 square miles. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there because that's where I know that obviously, wanting to make everyone accountable, these folks, that's their primary job, to where I know here within our district, the assistant superintendent position has been a combined of many, many duties. So that's why I wanted to draw that attention. The average annual pay for a school transportation director in Pennsylvania is $61,658 a year. Another comparison of compensation is Muncie School District pays about 10%, it's approximately around $40,000 of their contract, to Susquehanna Transit for performing these very same duties. Southern Columbia School District provides $26,000 to Fullerton School Bus Company for providing the same duties, and their fleet is about comparable to ours as well. And, and that's what we're asking. We're asking for $24,000 a year, and to keep that at the same rate within our 5-year contract every year, not to be increased or changed. And, obviously that's, I think that's a very fair number for the amount of time and what is required of this. And like I said, before there was a transportation director here in the district, that position was always combined with purchasing agent. But for many years, that was the two responsibilities of that person. And I know with just about every director I worked with over the years, they always joked about having a hotline on their desk because I couldn't even begin to tell you how many times a day they would have to call us. And that's where, with the change when Mr. Bonsall was director of operations and his job kind of became this massive globe, that's when we started doing more assisting and such. And actually it was Elizabeth had helped Mr. Bonsall at that time, and that's where she got familiar with working with the system. So, but just gonna ask Cam if he's got a couple things to say, and we'll gladly take any questions. So I didn't want to hold you up, so I rattled on pretty quick there. But.
Good evening, everyone. I won't take up much of your time. I just wanted to show support for the idea that Stephanie's brought to the table. We actually at Susquehanna, we also rely on Elizabeth, like she stated when she worked with Mr. Bonsall about learning the Bus Boss program. She's been very vital to us in helping with the student assignments and everything. So although we do our two separate contractors within the district, we have a great working relationship together, and it's all for the good of the order of the district to make sure we do our jobs properly. So I don't have any concerns if you guys look this stuff for those guys. Elizabeth's great. And we definitely need a liaison between the public, the district, and the contractor. There's so many things out there that we know on the rules of the road, if you will, but the computer system or anybody that's not educated enough wouldn't know, for example, not to have a door side stop on 287 or Route 44. So that's where you really need the human element in there to help make those decisions for safety. But that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for your time, and unless you have any questions for me.
I have a question.
Yes.
How long have you been in this occupation for transportation?
Well, I graduated from Jersey Shore School District in 1994, and I kind of got right into it. So I've been doing it for a long time. Been driving school bus since 1998. I drive in all the districts that we work for, and so I've been at it a long time.
And Mrs. Motter? How many years?
I heard her say 12 years.
Wow. So that's a lot of experience. Thank you.
Stephanie's family's been in it for a very long time.
Yeah, I don't want to age us, but Tam's third generation for this industry and I'm fourth. So yeah, well, our families have done it for a long time. But is there any questions or anything?
I have a question about the program that you use. Have you found when doing the research through the other districts if there were different programs that they used, or does everybody use Bus Boss, or?
I think Bus Boss is a familiar one, but honestly, the Jersey Shore had chose that program and we've never ventured to see what anyone else is doing. We've heard that name often, but I can't honestly say what else they use.
Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, before we chose Bus Boss, we sat through a couple presentations, and I've also sat through some of the other districts we work with, sat through some other proposals. And Keystone Central, for example, uses TransFinder as the South Williamsport. We use Bus Boss here. The TransFinder program might have a little bit more features than Bus Boss, but it's terribly expensive as compared to Bus Boss. The Bus Boss is very adequate for us, and like I said, Elizabeth is an expert. But there are other systems out there, but TransFinder is the most popular one amongst other districts. It's very expensive.
I was just kind of curious if there was something that might be not necessarily more user friendly, but that can do a little bit more for you guys to maybe eliminate a couple steps, or just wondering what was out there.
Sure.
What is the cost of Bus Boss?
$1,000 a year that we have budgeted.
Because you alluded to early on that there are things that don't work quite like they should.
Well, yeah, just,
I mean, no software is perfect. I understand all that.
yeah.
But I mean, and I have no idea when we say the other one is a lot more expensive, but sometimes you have to weigh, is more bucks worth it? If you
Right,
if you run into
right.
situations where you constantly have to monitor things or do something manually, then you have to start looking at,
Well, I'm a little bit old fashioned, so I relate that more to technology than necessarily that program. Because I will tell you that when we travel, and even though my husband likes to rely on the GPS, I most often double check on an old atlas as well. So just for that reason, because I just think sometimes all that information that's out there, it's so easy for something to catch a glitch. And like in our rural area, I mean, one of our mountain buses, the computer had suggested at one point to go from up top where Black Forest is and take the old road down past Slate Run to get down to Cedar Run. And of course, we just laughed at that because obviously we're not going to send a school bus down over the mountain on that dirt road, but the computer doesn't see that, so.
if it tells you to go over a cliff, you kind of stop.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Plus boss is about $4,000 a year.
thank you.
Ms. Wendecker, what is our fleet size?
our fleet size, I generally on average have about 20 contracted runs with you guys, and Cam's at
We have about 10 to 12.
anything else? Okay.
I do have one more question. Are you looking to add another position? Like, does Elizabeth need help? Or,
I actually hired a full-time guy 2 years ago because I just felt like she was burdened too much because she used to solely take care of our drivers and staff, and between what attention they needed and the attention to this job, it was too much. So I think we've got a very nice balance now. And honestly, I will tell you, like Cam said, as far as our relationship, he's been nudging at me for a couple years to ask for this, and we just were kind of waiting to see how what comes along with each year, I guess.
How long's the contract good for now? Is it still 5 years, or when did we?
Yeah, we just renewed actually. Yeah, so we're 5 years.
They've been doing it without. I have a question on the special bus requests, which I assume we approve, right? So do we entertain almost anything? I mean, it's like grandma one Monday, grandma three on, or how many grandmas you got, but I mean, how far do we go with, and I know you can't quantify it necessarily, but
In my opinion, when I arrived at Jersey Shore, we've gone too far. But at this point, I don't know how we get it back. And that's been our conversation. When I came here, I said to both of them, like, oh my goodness. But I don't know where you pick a line to start pulling that back. We have tried to, going forward, be very careful about what we are allowing. But if we've been allowing someone to do X for 3 years prior, how do we come back now and say, no, you can't do that? So we're trying to weed them out over time, but I don't know that we as a team or the board will be able to handle pulling it back completely.
well, but if we had a starting point, we allowed the grandfathering of anybody that's whatever situation they have, but I mean, to come up with some criteria moving forward that says we're going to allow this but not allow that. And I don't know how feasible that even is, because I don't know all the possibilities, but
The last conversation that we had with Dr. Ulmer about that, we said that, we'd like to work on the homework per se for that. We've already gathered some information about what surrounding districts, how they handle that. And obviously, every summer, I don't know if everyone in education is the same way, but you have high hopes of getting a giant to-do list done in the summertime, and it goes by too fast. But what we talked about was trying to put this together to give you guys plenty of time within possibly this school year, so that way there'd be plenty of notice out there of what your decision is for families to make that adjustment and who knows, maybe implement something different next year.
Do you find a lot of students are adding, I mean, obviously, if it's a home with separated parents and custody agreements, that is something that we have to abide by.
Yes.
But are you finding that more and more it's the mom, the dad, and the grandma? Like, are those grandmas adding on to bus routes? Or are they kind of along the way? Like, we can just drop, like, it's not gonna.
They're not adding on to bus routes, but oftentimes it involves multiple bus routes. So for instance, to go to mom's house, it's bus number 1, but they might only do that Monday and Wednesday. Then they have to ride bus number 3 to dad, but that's only Tuesday and Thursday. And then Meemaw and Pap have them Friday. And that's where it becomes complicated. And honestly, if there is one job in this world that I could possibly respect anymore is your school secretaries, because the burden that they take on dealing with this. I mean, we know every afternoon what is like, because these requests are supposed to be turned in, handled, managed and such, but obviously situations come up a little, they make a mistake of, oh, it's not so-and-so's, to me, how do you expect a 7 or 8-year-old? And of course, the school has their hands full trying to make sure that everybody, but there again, I can't express how many different schedules and things they're trying to keep track of.
And you're managing, correct me if I'm wrong, you're managing capacities of those buses based on the number of students. So you always have to use the maximum number that could potentially be on that bus, whether they run that bus every day or not, which becomes just as problematic.
Right,
Schedule.
right.
So, and to answer your question, one place where the line has been drawn is we do not allow special busing requests to add a stop. So the only way you can request, if you request something other than your regular bus stop, the only way you can move it to like grandma's house is if there's a bus stop near grandma's house. Like, she's gonna have to get you at that stop because special busing requests can't add a stop. So that is one place where the line has been drawn in our procedure.
And I think it's back to a lot of things in society to where parents need to be more responsible parents. And I think we all agree on that. And I can honestly say, as substituting on a bus from here or there, I've been shocked to see a parent show up at the original designated stop even when it's their day and they don't live there. Like, it's surprising, it's nice to see people making an effort, because so many of them don't. They just take it upon the school district and to make sure to do that for them. But
Thank you all very much for your presentation.
yeah, thank you.
Any additional questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you. I really have to give the credit to Elizabeth. She's the patient one.
You guys have done a bang-up job, even though I was on the school board back starting from 2007. You really, Gephardt's, Susquehanna have done a first-class job ever since I know of, and the buses is the way they run.
Well, Cam and I had to get licensed right after birth, so we weren't given much.
Also under my presentation, I have put on here, based on a conversation that the board had with me, discussion on policy 913.1, sponsorship and advertising. I had a couple different requests to take a look at this policy. So my question this evening is how the board would like to look at this policy and I'm not asking what you want changed or anything right now. I'm asking how you want to move forward with looking at that policy, since that was the question that I received, is can we look at this? Any thoughts?
There's a number of you that had questions about this. Now, I guess we have separated the things for the televised sports, so that's separate from this to see how that goes. So is there anybody at this point that would like to be part of a committee to look at this policy and go further into it?
Is this
I would.
for donations also? Or-
Yes.
Okay.
That's what falls
Sponsorship,
under
donations,
Yep.
okay. All right, thank you.
These policies are huge. I was reading up on them. I went to other districts and tried to get their policies. And so as it is right now, we can't have sponsorship of anything, correct? Because I know there are people that wanted to sponsor banners. They weren't allowed to do that because of this policy.
That goes way back, and you know, that's part of the policy, and if you change it, you change it. That's part of, you can change policies by first reading and the second reading, but I think it needs to be done through a committee, and then conversations, you can get conversations from all included.
I'll volunteer.
Okay, so we will have a committee, and it doesn't have to be done in 6 weeks. You can take the whole year if you need to look at other things and see what's going on. And so we have Patrice Dober, Kayla Calhoun, and Mike Allen, and I'll identify Kayla as chairman.
Thank you. That's my report.
Next, we have courtesy of the floor. This courtesy of the floor is for public comments on tonight's agenda items. Give us your name, address, and agenda item you will be addressing, and you will have 3 minutes. There's one person signed up, and that's Mr. Shireman.
The agenda item was on the grounds, and I would like to invite the whole school board to come to the 200 block of Mount Pleasant Avenue and see how bad the sidewalks are. Sidewalks have been, over the years, been used calcium chloride and everything else on and scraped down. And you probably at least got 50, 75 feet, a quarter of a block, where the cement has crumbled down to where it's nothing but fine dust, and it represents a hazard for people to walk over with it. And I'd just like to make a few other comments. Mr. Kinley and Mrs. Stemler, I want to congratulate you on your stance on about closing schools, but I do have one thing to say. If you do close 2 schools in this, if that would happen, this town is not going to be able to handle the traffic unless you work with the borough, because the borough walked away from some traffic solutions back in when we tackled the elementary school with it. And the other thing that the board has to address is the shortage of crossing guards. There has been a problem throughout the year of not being able to hire crossing guards that I know of, and been shortages of crossing guards, and and it puts a real strain. And that is the other thing. If you have an increase in traffic and what the crossing guards have to do, they won't be able to do it. And the other thing, I know I'm off base here, but we're talking about finances and that. A lot of elderly people in this district and that. And I know the school board okayed a 2% raise for the superintendent. This is nothing personal. But $2,500 may not seem like a lot, but to a lot of people it is. I know over the years when my wife had a beauty shop with the elderly people around, that they would come in and they would ask my wife, can we wait till later to pay you? Or else I've had in my plumbing business people, elderly people that couldn't afford a water heater. They needed one. They swallowed their pride and say, can you do it now and I'll pay you later? I think it is obscene at this time for somebody to accept it when we're making $127,000 with a benefits package of which is probably between $20,000 and $30,000 to accept a $2,500 raise. That's a lot. It may not seem like it, but the only way the school board is going to get control of expenses is shutting some schools down, but also starting to learn to control what wages, benefits, in that. Thank you.
Moving on to personnel items. Letter E, we have A through L. May I have well, let me go through them first. We have an appointment of Frederick Brown as head security guard, resignation from Christine Nagel as paraprofessional, resignation from Alyssa English from technology department intern, appointment of mentors for our new teachers, appointment of Brody Smith and Jake Anderson to halftime assistant varsity football coach, appointment of Monica Richards to head middle school cross country, the 2022-2023 fall sports coaching staff and stipends are listed in the attachment. Appointment of Ashley Agrega as the special education paraprofessional. Appointment of Autumn Cantrell as the special education professional. And accepting the resignation of Matt Hartman as girls track and field coach. And also we have a child rearing leave. May I have a motion for A through L?
Motion.
Can somebody second it?
Mrs. Grant.
Come on. All right, any questions or comments?
Question on, age. What, is there anything that determines that we need it? Is there anything that determines that we need an assistant coach for any sport?
Talking about one or a certain sport in
Yeah,
particular, or
I'm talking about cheerleading.
I think my understanding is it had to do with making sure there were always two adults present. The why, at least every sport has at least some assistant coach, and some have more assistants because of the size of the sport.
Okay, like softball does not have one, is that correct?
No, it does. It just maybe it could be. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they have an assistant, a varsity assistant, but it may not be on here
May
yet.
not be a stipend.
You have had an assistant here for both of them. Oh, no, that's soccer, sorry. They may not have hired an assistant yet. I mean, they would have an assistant. Well, let me back up, Wayne. That's junior high, so it kind of comes under the umbrella. You have the head coach, you have the assistant coach, you have the junior high coach.
So most likely he's the junior high head coach, but there's somebody else there because there's other coaches you've already hired.
Would that apply also to cross country?
Yes.
Cross country, they work together, both the high school and the middle school, and we just hired the middle school cross country is on this list here.
And the answer to some of your question is, these are only renewals. So if the person is hired new, they're a separate agenda item and not just thrown on the renewals list.
Thank you.
The other one on there there's no assistant, it's tennis. There's the provision for an assistant in the language, but we don't have one
At this point.
at this point.
The other thing, Wayne, that happens with, or all of you, that happens with cheerleading is as they get into the winter, they split themselves up between like basketball and wrestling. So it's not always necessarily that they're two together all the time. We'd like to have, especially in traveling, but I don't think some of those travel.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a question. D, about the mentorship. Is that, how long typically do they do a mentorship?
That's for the teacher's first year of employment.
Right.
And the mentor is obligated to that new teacher all year. They have 2 days that they come in before school begins to meet with the new teacher. And then they're required to meet, I think it's once a month or twice a month. So
For the entire year? Okay. And these are the only ones?
these are the only ones, as of right now. We have a couple more teachers to hire. Once they're hired, then mentors will be assigned.
Okay. And if we have seasoned, does it change if we have seasoned teachers that get hired?
So,
I think they're a half a year. They have for the purpose of the nitty gritty of what happens.
How the facility
as
works.
far as
Like
Yeah.
how okay, because facilities are all different.
Right.
Okay, and if it's half a year, is it the same price?
That'd be half of it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, like sign. Motion carries. Next, we have curriculum instruction, and with there are no items, so we will continue on. Next, we have building and grounds, the installation of electric service to the soccer stadium by PP&L at a cost of $5,530 to be paid from the 2022-23 maintenance budget. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
What this is basically doing is taking the electrician from that, we call it the Johnson House up there by the track, and putting it so that it's at the track. We're severing, am I right? We're severing the electricity at the house.
Yes. Instead of the service coming through the house to the stadium, it'll come directly to the stadium from the main line on Schaefer Lane.
Any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, like sign. Ayes have it. Finance. We have an acceptance of a donation of $500 to be used for STEM programs at JSE. Breakfast and lunch prices to remain the same for the 22-23 school year. Contract with Direct Energy to lock in prices for natural gas for the next 5 years, effective July 1 of this year through June 30th of 2027 for all buildings. And an agreement addendum with Source for Teachers to include 22-23 substitute rates, which is attached. Now, I meant to look up the breakfast and lunch prices. Can you give them to me, Ben?
Elementary breakfast is $1. Well, all breakfasts for students are $1.20. Elementary lunch is $2.30. Middle school and high school is $2.40. Reduced breakfast is 30 cents and reduced lunch is 40 cents. Adult breakfast is $2 and adult lunch is $3.10. Just so you know, this is what was in the food service budget. When we reviewed the budget with nutrition, they did not recommend an increase in the funding or increase in the rates solely because what they see in their expertise is every nickel you raise prices, participation goes down 1%. I did make a note on here. Oh, that's the next one. Oh, no. The direct energy prices, we locked in at $4.67 per decatherm. We were at $2.76 per decatherm. Current market rate, I just looked at it today, is $8.47. So we're about half of what the current market is.
Can you tell me what Global Companies LLC is from this donation?
I think it was, I not honestly 100% sure, but I believe it was a grant that was written. Hold on, I'm gonna pull that up. Sorry, 1 second. Looks like it's an energy company that I'm assuming it was a grant, but I can let you know.
It's pretty common that every once in a while you get something, that you get things like that. And there's usually no strings attached to it. You're just asking to use it for STEM.
So does a principal apply for that?
Or teacher.
Or
I'll
teacher?
check.
Or
we asking questions now? Or was there-
Yeah, you can ask questions. Or didn't I do that yet? Oh, because we went through. May I have a motion?
Give it a little bit.
You get that, because I'm. Did we get a motion? Mike did. And Nancy did. Oh, that's right, because I asked him to feel.
No, okay. Can I, have you explain, because I saw for some school districts were able to continue, their free lunches and free breakfasts like they had the past 2 years. So is there a reason why Jersey Shore could not do that?
Well, first of all, they're not continuing under the same program. So I think it's important that we understand that. So there are ways to qualify for that going forward, but it's based on your free and reduced lunch numbers. So you have to meet a certain eligibility, and Mr. Enders might be able to help me here, but you have to meet a certain eligibility requirement in order to continue that, but it's under a different program. That makes sense.
But so when do we do that every year where we ask for the eligibility? Because maybe this year there might be more eligible people than there were before COVID.
We did look at that with nutrition. It's an acronym, CEP, Community Eligibility Program. We are just above the threshold. Nutrition did not recommend it solely because the district has to pay for the difference between the eligible students and the non-eligible students.
So that's what those school districts are having to do.
Some of them may have been in it before COVID, so they already had that established.
Or they have a higher number of eligible students.
Yes. The higher the eligibility, the higher number of eligible students, free and reduced classification.
So I guess the question is, if, when that all comes in this year, if it is at that threshold, at that point in time, can you apply for it also? Does it have to be done prior to the
It
school
has to
year?
be done prior to the school.
Okay.
There are deadlines for applying for the upcoming school year.
So it'd be based on next year on what happens this year.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, like sign. Motion carries. Miscellaneous. We have letters A through M. Policy 237, electronic devices at the second read. An agreement with Viata Home Health Care to provide nursing service for a student. Amendment to the agreement with Justice Works. Awarding the 22-23, 23-24, 24-25 senior high yearbook bid to Jostens. A 2-year MOU between Central State University and Jersey Shore School District. A service agreement with UPMC Sports Medicine for athletic trainer services. Renewal of the Jersey Shore area pre-counts with All Things Bright and Beautiful and Your Guardian Angel preschool and child care. A school nurse practicum affiliation agreement with Eastern School of Nursing, effective this school term. Mrs. Petrosky, board president, is waiving the treasurer's stipend fee. A letter of agreement between Jersey Shore and the Lycoming Clinton Joiner Board for school-based outreach for student assistance services. Administration to place the couple items on the bid. And a memorandum of understanding between Pine Creek Township Police Department and Jersey Shore Area School District. The other ones were done earlier, but we also found out that this one is up at this time. May I have a motion?
I'll second.
Any questions?
I have a question on the electronic device policy. with all due respect to the committee that has been working on this, I'm still confused as to the authority paragraph. I mean, at this point, are we saying that except for the last, I think item, yeah, the authorized uses on the last page, that basically cell phones are not, electronic devices are not allowed during the day? And if so, why doesn't the authority part read, the board prohibits use of, and finish that line and just say the following exceptions will apply and insert the authorized uses on the last page and forget all the internet website stuff and unethical conduct stuff?
I think you're correct in your understanding, but I think all of that was asked to be there so that the board clearly identified what became a disciplinary issue. That makes sense.
Well, then I understand the reason. To me, that maybe should be on its own. I don't know. It just clouds that authority to me. That's just my opinion. But plus, when you start, I think you're right. It needs to be somewhere as far as identifying. If we say though that except for those last page stuff, they're not allowed, isn't that enough to say that if you use it?
One of the things, Mr. Kinley, if you look at under authorized uses, other reasons determined appropriate by the building principal, so that gives the building principals a little leeway. We also looked at this as a starting off point, and so there'll be this in conjunction with what we see in the student handbook, and that doesn't mean that this will never be revisited. We may have to, we looked at this as a starting point. Well, I shouldn't speak for you, Angela.
You both said exactly how I felt.
You're saying the building principals, they can ultimately determine, they can only okay a use that is other than the authorized uses listed on the last page.
Well, that's what it says there. Other reasons determined appropriate by the building principal. And again, they have this in their handbook, and they have further delineations in their handbook, but I'm not sure their handbooks are totally ready for the new handbooks are ready.
Yeah, it does go in, you're right. It does go into more detail in the handbook. It always did, but they will have to be updated to reflect this language.
Can somebody give me an example of under the off-campus activities, item number 1?
That could be like a sports or athletic trip, a field trip. You're on school business on a school vehicle, but you're not on campus.
Probably more often be things like student council that are just taking a handful, or FBLA that are just taking their officers. There's many times that could be the case.
But it says whether or not via school district furnished transportation. What if they were using their private vehicle?
Which there's mechanisms to do that. They have to turn their license into there are mechanisms to do that.
Okay. But what what are they not allowed to do in their private vehicle if they're going to the prom or to a sporting event? Are they not allowed to use their phone?
They could, because they're headed, it's a school-sponsored event. So I'm sorry, maybe I don't understand your question. Would you rephrase it?
In that case, to me, they're attending a school-sponsored event, but we're not transporting them. They're not being transported by the school district. So until they're at the school-sponsored event, I don't think this
They're
would,
not under your supervision.
yeah, they're not under our school supervision at that point.
It doesn't say that. It says conduct occurs during the time the student is traveling to and from school or traveling to and from school-sponsored activities, whether or not via school district transportation or obviously not, which is their own.
You're implying that there's an automatic right of school districts to discipline students when you're not in your supervision. So the only time coming to or going from that you have the opportunity to discipline, especially related to these policies, is if they're under your direct supervision, when you're acting in parental locus. So when they're coming and going from their own personal vehicles, you don't have that same ability to control and regulate what they're doing.
So should that last part be changed?
No, because you're adding an exception that's already in the law based on that. What you're regulating is when you're supervising a student and they're under your supervision and control.
So what it really means is it only applies if it's school district furnished transportation. But it says whether or not.
I think it's whether the intent is whether or not you're coming or going from one of those events. I don't know. I don't think it's implying that you are automatically creating an obligation of the district to control an event that you cannot control legally to begin.
I'd like a separate roll call on that item.
So let me ask a question. So if a child is on their way home on a bus after a sporting event or wherever they're at, are they allowed to use their phone to let the parents know what time they're supposed to pick them up?
That would be something we said falls under that other reasons determined appropriate by the building principal. They could say that's something that's allowable with permission from whoever the supervisor of that activity is.
So the bus driver they would have had to ask the principal before they left?
Not if the principal says up front that's an allowable activity.
And the bus driver wouldn't technically be in charge. It would be the coaches or chaperones. Like that doesn't fall under the bus driver's realm. That because the principal or the coach or chaperone is the authoritative figure on that trip.
Okay.
So if at the beginning of the year the coaches have the meeting with the principals or athletic director, the principal will then give the coach the right that says during your functions you are allowed to allow your kids to use devices during travel. You know what I mean? Like
Okay. Because I know that that's done.
right. And nobody's saying that we don't want that to be done. We're just saying that the coach or chaperones will have to have the authority or whatever given to them by the principal. Right.
What about the children that are on buses like really, really early in the morning and they put earbuds in all the way to school? Are they allowed to do that with their phones and listen to music? Do they have to get special permission to do that?
Not if we make that a situation where we say that's an appropriate use.
So who do they get that?
And some of our buses have Wi-Fi on them, right? So on those buses, I assume kids would be allowed to get on to do any schoolwork or whatever that they had.
But how do they do that? I mean, do they ask the bus driver? Because there isn't a coach there. Who do they ask? Who do they get permission from?
I would say that's a discussion that Dr. Ulmer needs to have with principals to come to an understanding what those are, and it would have to be clearly identified to parents and students, and us.
But that could also be something that is placed in the student handbook.
Right, it can be. I don't know what's in this, we might find out.
So it might have already been covered under the handbook.
Okay. I just don't want to prove something that is going to be hard for a child to do that. I mean, who do they go to? How do they get approval? Are they allowed to do that? Aren't they allowed to do that? I wouldn't even know what to say. Who would they go to then?
My understanding, the idea was to go in the handbooks and orientation at the beginning of each school year. They go through the handbook. This is what's allowed, this is what's not allowed. So if you do run into situations where someone gets in trouble, they have punishment to fall back on. Just as the building principal says, this is what's tolerated. This is what our handbook says that we're allowed to do. So the kids have it clear at the
So
orientation.
in the handbook, it spells it out. Okay, I didn't see that.
That's what, I mean, the handbooks have, we're tweaking it a little bit according to some discipline, but those details have always been there. It's just to make it jive, and we'll continue to tweak it because some things won't work and some things will. And some things, technology. So something's not going to work even though it sounded good on paper. And the flip side, we never saw something come in that needs to be changed.
Handbook.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Chris, who is responsible if their cell phone devices or their iPads are used in an inappropriate, abusive way? Who does that fall under?
You're talking in school?
Yeah, in school.
The teachers, the principals, the staff to be monitoring that protocols and making sure, and if it's identified as students not using it, then it's up to them to issue discipline. My guess is there'll be some kind of protocol developed by the administration on how that.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, depending on the seriousness of the violation, will depend on whether it ever sees my desk or not relative to discipline that has to come before the board.
Any other questions? Yeah, I did write it down. All right, so all those in favor of B through M, say yay.
Yay.
Not in favor, like sign. B through M, motion is carried. Letter A, policy 237, Mr. Enders, we will have a roll call.
Mr. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Calhoun,
Yes.
Ms. Stobler,
Yes.
Mrs. Edwards,
Yes.
Mrs. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Kinley,
No.
Mrs. Petrowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Stemler,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-1.
Letter J, there is none listed for old business. Courtesy of the floor. This courtesy of the floor is for public comment for items not on the agenda. Give your name, address, and the item you would like to address, and you will have 3 minutes.
Bert Francis, 1425 Locust Street, Jersey Shore, PA. Just a couple quick things. Pick me ups maybe in our town. You watch the newspapers, whatever. I see West Company They're going into a 7-year expansion of West Company, adding maybe 200 employees. I see the county commissioners came to Shore Borough with about $3 million. They're going to build us a new fire station. They're going to build us a new police station. They're going to build us a new magistrate's court, and they're going to also bring the coroner's office to Jersey Shore. And the county commissioners are saying our region is expanding and growing. I see some new houses going up over on Route 44. I see a subdivision down on Broad Street, 4 properties. I see a couple more going up on Pine Creek Avenue that way. That's a plus. That's good, isn't it? That's good news. So let's talk about what that's going to bring to the town. That's going to bring a lot of things. I would like, I'm sure it's going to be coming up maybe in one of your work sessions coming up or whatever. We're going to come up and we're going to be talking about school closing. We talked about school closing tonight and saving money and not saving money. I would like to see the board prepare a document based on the school closure of Nippenose Township School, which we battled for 10 years to save that school. I would like to see a document to be presented so that everybody understands when we go into talking about school closing and so on and so forth. You better prove to me that we save money by closing schools. You will find, and I want to ask, and I think Mr. Henderson can tell us, I'm not quite sure, we went in order to close Nippenose, but we had to go another $8 million or so into debt. And we were still paying off that debt annually. What are we paying? What, a couple $1 million a year, something like that on our, most of the people in our district don't understand our budget at all. There are 2 sides to our budget. There's the operating side of our budget and then the debt payoff. And that comes out of the operating fund. So I think that needs to be in hand when this topic comes up about saving money and closing schools. I just dread the thoughts of closing schools. It's terrible. We've closed 20-some schools already in our district. And so it seems to me like things are going to grow a little bit. And based on the fact that if we postpone, pay off our debt, and then maybe we can borrow some money, and then maybe PlanCon will be back in business. And I'd like to see Mr. Enders, too, then in this, to be able to discuss and talk about, we're paying off on our debt, but we also are getting reimbursement from PlanCon, right, Mr. Enders? Yeah, and how much reimbursement, annual reimbursement are we getting from the PlanCon process on that $8 million? Yeah.
Budgeted and calculated. I can tell you it significantly decreased this year due to the fact that is that's being paid for this year. Each funding has a different value of
Right. Okay, so we still, we're getting refunds or we're getting paid back for PlanCon. And so if we decide to do a simple, crazy thing like going closing schools now, we go out and borrow money, whatever we're going to borrow, and we're going to pay interest on it. But we're not going to get any reimbursements from anybody that I know of. I don't think the bank's going to reimburse us anything if we go borrow money from them. So if we wait and hope, then maybe PlanCon will be back in business.
Start to close up.
Okay, all right, close, all right, maybe PlanCon will be back in business for that time, and there'll be some money out there to play. We get a new governor, and then, anyway, whatever. Yeah, but this, side note, I got called out of bed this morning, real early from Texas, and it's a sad note for me, and I was told that one of my classmates, buddies, teammates, good friend, lifelong, had passed away just a short time prior to that phone call. And we were members of the 1949 undefeated football team. And they got a hold of me right away and so on and so forth. But then in the conversation, and the friend that comes, hey, Bert, you're the last one. And like, geez, I don't know how to take that. I'm not so sure I like being the last one. But anyway, so that was a great run, that group of guys. And we had, Ray Ferguson was his name. Somebody might have known Ray, but he went on to Pittsburgh, and then he went in the military, and then he married, and then he and 2 other guys formed a pharmaceutical company, became millionaires. And we don't follow up on graduates sometimes, the accomplishments of graduates in our school district and what they've done. I know other places that do that. We ought to do that sometime. We are working on well, I hope we can get it. Would you... when I put this on the table, think of it. At one time, a graduate of the Jersey Shore School District was made and won the race, and he was made the sports nut of America. The sports nut of America, and this is a big deal. And so on. I got a stack of newspaper articles and documents on this guy, and I've talked with him and some other people. We're thinking about trying to come up with a sports museum, just starting out with his memorabilia, which we would estimate maybe can run at $1.5 to $2 million. And still, the sports memorabilia is a gimmick to get people to come to Jersey Shore. He's got 1,500 hockey sticks. He's got 2,000 baseball bats. He's got 1 million baseball cards. A graduate of Jersey Shore. That's good stuff, isn't it? Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Any others for courtesy of the floor? Seeing or hearing none, there will be no executive session. May I have a motion for adjournment?
But before you leave, there is a binder at your seat that is, each of you should have one to take with you. Thank you.
I don't know what's going on with these.
First, having to look at that, plus talk about.